The world outside was growing increasingly chaotic, or so it seemed to the observer. The film's fundamental pursuit was less about crafting grand social commentary and more about dissecting the origins and motivations of such a character. Embedded within the movie were specific themes, but the core drive centered on the question of transformation. What factors led to the evolution of someone like the Joker? The character's essence held a particular allure, marked by an affinity for mayhem and chaos. This sense of unpredictability drew those involved in the film's creation toward him. The filmmaker, approached with the suggestion to present an alternative view within the DC universe, recognized the boldness of telling the Joker's origin story. The vision brought forth resonated with those involved, aligning closely with their imaginations, due in part to the director's distinct perspective. The director had never genuinely aspired to direct a comic book film. Instead, the project appealed as an opportunity to craft an in-depth character study about a figure whose background was virtually unknown. Approaching the story from this angle, the motivation was less about delivering a standard superhero narrative and more about constructing a compelling psychological portrait that would intrigue audiences. From the outset, the studio imposed minimal restrictions. The initial idea was received with openness, and permission was granted to explore and develop the concept. After a year spent co-writing the script with a collaborator, they returned to the studio without having adhered to any set mandates. A significant departure from traditional comic book conventions was made. Even the lead character's name, Arthur Fleck, was newly invented and selected without precedent from previous iterations. To the possible disappointment of some purists, no supernatural transformation defined the character. The depiction remained grounded in a plausible reality, eschewing the fantastical aspects familiar to comic book adaptations. The story moved away from the archetypal origin involving dramatic transformation. There were no scenes involving vats of chemicals, famously associated with the Joker's mythology. Instead, a world was constructed in which only a faint echo of the comic context could be recognized, with the intention of exploring more profound psychological questions. The creative team delved into research on narcissism, ego, and other psychological concepts, folding these into their understanding of the character. Their interpretation cast the Joker as a narcissist stripped of ego, with the alter ego, Arthur, representing control, and the Joker embodying pure impulsiveness. Central to their narrative was the metaphor of masking the notion that many spend their lives presenting facades to the world. The story asked what would happen if these masks were shed, revealing the tumultuous core beneath. For Arthur, intense control defined his existence, yet there were fleeting glimpses of his underlying nature. Upon abandoning the facade, the question arose, what would occur if the shadow self were allowed to surface unimpeded? As the film moved from abstract ideas to execution, the creators focused on grounding the narrative in a distinct, tangible setting. They set the story in an environment reminiscent of historical New York, the early 1980s, as recalled from childhood. This city appeared dilapidated, dysfunctional, and on the brink of collapse, its fraying social contract imbued with a volatile tension. This rendition of Gotham drew heavily on the designer's recollections of the era and location. The film treated the city as its own character dynamic, disjointed, and steeped in strife. Distinctions were made between neighborhoods, workplaces, and social centers, often manifesting in differing architecture and even in how garbage was collected. Every quadrant of the city, from affluent districts to struggling neighborhoods, displayed unique features that contributed to the overall sense of place. To guide the filming and storytelling process, the creative team went so far as to craft detailed maps charting Arthur's movements across the city. This careful design enabled the storytellers to visualize relationships between various locations, including subways and neighborhoods, further anchoring the narrative in its imagined urban landscape. Production took place throughout the Bronx and Brooklyn, and even in stretches of Newark, New Jersey, all selected to evoke the gritty spirit of Gotham. The film opened in Gotham Square, an unmistakable parallel to Times Square, which had once pulsed as the city's center, but, by the period depicted, had become notorious. Creating this urban backdrop posed its own creative challenges, yet it remained essential to immersing viewers in the world where the story's transformation and chaos would fully unfold. The team eventually had to travel to Newark, a once blighted city now finding its way back to vitality. In the heart of it still lingered a fragment of old New York, its architecture, scale, and grit echoing the past. It was there that they decided to construct their vision of Gotham Square. They worked deliberately to capture as much as possible on camera. Todd Phillips and Mark Friedberg focused on creating a tangible world around the actors, allowing them to interact with their environment in real time. Where the physical set ended, visual effects seamlessly extended the vision. Although New York had been filmed countless times, the filmmakers transformed familiar locations to make them feel unique to Gotham. They stripped away iconic identifiers, replacing or dulling buildings to create a weary, weathered atmosphere that was always felt, but seldom noticed directly. Friedberg considered the placement of Arthur's neighborhood one of the best visual choices. Though Arthur was first situated in Brownsville, one of New York's toughest areas, the setting lacked the varied terrain Phillips desired. Wanting more texture, Phillips reimagined Arthur's home in the South Bronx, not the infamous Fort Apache district, but the hilly sector where public stairways, tight alleys, and irregular streets visually unsettled the world. The shift introduced a physical and emotional depth to both Arthur's environment and the story's Gotham, a version of New York rarely associated with topography. The collaborative world Phillips built with Mark and the rest of the crew was both haunting and immersive, heightened by an unforgettable score. The composer began writing the music immediately after reading the script, experimenting with cello tones and emotional tonalities until the story's mood crystallized into a central theme. That theme emerged almost by accident, but when it did, it resonated precisely with the emotions she had felt upon first reading the screenplay. The resulting composition felt inseparable from the film, as though it were the sound of Gotham streets in 1981. Phillips always wrote his films with a specific actor in mind, believing it anchored his creative process. For this project, he envisioned Joaquin Phoenix from the start. A preliminary sketch of the Joker in the subway resembled Phoenix so closely that it became difficult for the director to imagine anyone else in the role. He was drawn to Phoenix's unpredictability, a performer who operated like a jazz musician among mathematicians. That same unpredictable energy defined Arthur, merging performer and character into something raw and alive. Phoenix, in turn, sought directors with singular vision and emotional insight. Phillips's screenplay convinced him that the filmmaker possessed both, especially in understanding Arthur's pain and confusion. Yet taking on such an iconic role came with immense pressure. Every previous interpretation of the Joker had been memorable, which created both fear and motivation. Phillips channeled that fear into energy, while Phoenix took time to trust the project and its director. Over several months of conversation and reflection, their partnership solidified. Phillips understood how transformative a wardrobe could be for actors. For Phoenix, entering Arthur's apartment did not ignite the transformation as effectively as putting on the costume. The proper clothing served as a second skin, bridging actor and character. Costume designer Mark Bridges dressed Arthur as an everyman, clothing that was practical, somewhat youthful, but also reminiscent of an older man's attire. From that foundation, the final Joker outfit was designed organically. Phillips and Bridges wanted a look that respected the Joker's long legacy while standing out. The suit Arthur wore on stage at the Comedy Club subtly evolved into the same one he donned as the Joker, its fabric tone altered only slightly to go unnoticed. During the final fitting, when Phoenix tried on the completed ensemble, shirt, waistcoat, and coat with a distinctly 1970s cut, his demeanor changed. His movement became more fluid and self-assured, perfectly embodying the character's transformation. The process also involved physical transformation. Discussions about Arthur's frailty led to the decision that Phoenix would lose significant weight, dropping from 180 pounds to around 125. The actor assured Phillips he could handle it. The director's concern persisted, yet Phoenix's determination to grasp the role's physical essence reflected his total commitment to the character's descent into madness. The account begins with a recollection of an actor's extreme commitment to his art. He sought to embody a character so profoundly that he resorted to a drastic method of preparation abstaining from food until his body became almost unrecognizable. Throughout one summer, he subsisted on little more than an apple each day, and when he appeared at the first table read, he had lost 50 pounds, appearing as a mere shadow of himself. His transformation was not only physical, but deeply psychological, a full immersion into his role. The director, Todd Phillips, never rehearsed the part with him in the traditional sense. They discussed the script, the story, and the emotional landscape, but never the technicalities of delivery. For them, discovery in the moment was essential. Their working style was spontaneous and adaptive, with changes constantly surfacing during filming as the evolving narrative revealed new pathways. Each day before shooting, Phoenix would meet with Phillips and co-writer Scott Silver in the director's trailer, where they rewrote scenes together, adjusting tone and structure based on what the story demanded that day. Phillips's approach, marked by intellectual sharpness and fearless creativity, pushed the boundaries of conventional storytelling. Known initially for comedic films, his early work, including a documentary on Gigi Allen, reflected a fascination with human extremity. Despite being labeled a comedy director, he demonstrated the instincts of an auteur, directing with fluidity and openness to improvisation. His past taught him that spontaneity could shape truth, whether in humor or tragedy. For Phoenix, collaborating with Phillips was a process of mutual surprise. The director often devised new lines spontaneously, which the actor initially resisted, only to realize their power later, once performed. Phillips had a keen ear for rhythmable to sense when a scene faltered and to offer remedies on the spot. This dynamic, built on tension and discovery, gave rise to some of the film's most memorable moments. One defining instance occurred when filming a bathroom scene meant to follow a violent act. According to the script, Arthur was supposed to hide a gun behind a grate and wash off his makeup. Yet, when Phillips and Phoenix arrived on set, they questioned the logic of the scene. Would Arthur, in his fragile mental state, even think in such calculated terms? Would he care about evidence? The scripted action felt false. Instead of forcing a decision, they explored alternatives until Phillips played a haunting cello track from composer Hildur Gudnadottir. As the music filled the tiled space, Phoenix began to move instinctively, his body communicating what words could not. The spontaneous dance marked the actual birth of the Joker, a moment of eerie grace that captured transformation through movement alone. That dance sequence cemented both the character's evolution and the collaboration between director and actor. It unfolded with no plan, no rehearsal, and yet it distilled the film's essence, an expression of madness rendered poetically. Phillips later observed that the performance revealed a buried elegance in the character, previously hinted at in more minor gestures, a courteous door hold, the flair of a clown's motion, the suggestion that music already existed within him, waiting to emerge. To refine this physicality, Phoenix trained briefly with choreographer Michael Arnold, who exposed him to ideas about rhythm and organic movement. Among Arnold's inspirations was a performance by Ray Bolger in The Old Soft Shoe, which for Phoenix encapsulated the Joker's struggle to surface and the strange joy and pain intertwined in transformation. Those who worked with Phoenix described him as astonishingly fluid, a performer never encumbered by repetition. His work seemed almost supernatural in how fully he inhabited each moment. For the editor and director, sorting through the countless takes was both a challenge and a delight, each performance offering new emotional textures. The film's lengthy editing process reflected this wealth of material. Every version of a scene captured another facet of a single descent into chaos, a mosaic of an actor's total surrender to character. The actor possessed an exceptional responsiveness to direction. A single note would transform his entire performance, making each adjustment feel spontaneous and profound. He never confined himself to a single interpretation. His work remained fluid, unpredictable, and alive. The creative team realized that this method-embracing uncertainty was the only authentic way to capture the character's erratic nature. The unpredictability brought a sense of danger and raw excitement, as no one could anticipate what might unfold next. One moment in particular stood out. After filming a scene in the dressing room where the character had been fired and was preparing to leave, the actor impulsively re-entered, approached the time clock, and smashed it off the wall, claiming he had forgotten to punch out. The entire crew reacted in stunned amazement at the intensity and spontaneity of the moment. The film's strength, as the director later described, came from its constant undercurrent of tension. Every movement and expression the actor delivered carried that palpable edge. His co-stars recognized the difficulty of his immersion. He fully inhabited the role, merging personality and performance until the line between actor and character blurred. Observing him absorb a new identity was at once unsettling and captivating. The director saw the film as open to interpretation. In his view, the figure on screen might not truly be the Joker, but rather one man's version of how the Joker could have come to be a story told by an unreliable narrator within the confines of a mental institution. The character itself became a synthesis of multiple influences: the director's vision, the writer's framework, aspects of the actor's own nature, and echoes of cinematic icons such as Katharine Hepburn and Frank-N-Furter. Together, these fragments fused into the Joker that the audience ultimately witnessed. No one involved had predicted that such unlikely ingredients would merge so organically. Yet through their combination, the performance and the film found a strange and powerful resonance, something born not of precision but of creative chaos.